Youorns. Greetings, fellow Watford fans. Omar here, and it's time for another edition of the Youorns 10-minute take on Watford 1, Southampton 1. And Watford continuing their rich vein of form with 9 of their last 10 games now they've been unbeaten in. That's very impressive stuff. It's been a really good run for Watford, this men's first team, growing into itself and coming into their own. Their identity is beginning to form now under Val Ishmael, as is their confidence and consistency. The way they're playing these games shows you that they have begun to believe, and they've got the mentality to get them through what has actually been, could potentially be, a very tricky stage of their season. They played Leicester City a few weeks ago coming out of the international break. They got beaten in that game. And then the very next weekend, they had a game, of course, and then they played Hull City. I think that was the next game. I don't even remember. All these games, they come thick and fast now. But they played Hull City and then Norwich, whichever order that was in. And they came through those games pretty well. And now Southampton, a team that Watford just cannot beat at Vicarage Road in the league. Now, I say that because the last time I remember Watford beating Southampton, and I'm sure there were times since this point, but the last time I clearly remember Watford beating Southampton was in a League Cup match back in the early 1980s. I think it was 1982 or 83, somewhere around there. And Watford in the second leg of the League Cup throttled Southampton 7-1, completely crushed them 7-1. And that was after Southampton scored 4 against them in the first leg of that in a 4-0 Southampton win. But Watford went wild at the Vic back then and crushed them 7-1. Now, look, that's the last time I remember Watford beating Southampton at Vicarage Road in any competition. Now, look, I know they have won 1 or 2 since then, but you have to go back a number of years now to find the last time that Watford beat Southampton at the Vic. In all these league games, whether it's Premier League or whether it's in the Championship, Watford had been losing these games. They had been losing them or getting a draw, and they got a draw here in this game. But Watford have not beaten Southampton at the Vic in quite some time, at least as I remember it. Now, look, you go back to these games at the Vic, where Watford drew 2-2 against Southampton in the Premier League at the Vic. Now, this was a game where Abdoulaye Doucouré handballed the ball into the back of the net to give Watford a point late on in that game. The game and in the Premier League where Shane Long for Southampton scored the fastest, it still is, the fastest Premier League goal ever scored. And that was just within 7 seconds as Watford came from behind in that game to get a point. Andre Gray late on in front of the Rookery. And I mean, you can go through a number of these games in the Premier League. Watford lost at home to Southampton 1-0 the last time they were in the Premier League at the Vic. I mean, I can go through all these games where Watford and Southampton, and Watford lost, I think, 3-2 to Southampton or 4-2 at home to Southampton in the Premier League one time at the Vic. I can go through all these games now the last 5-6 years or so, and at least, and maybe longer than that, 8 years ago, 8 years back now, and you can't find a Watford win. You really can't. So the bottom line is I've made a whole meal of that the last couple of minutes here. I want to tell you that with that all enumerated, Watford managed to, I think, play very well in this game. Now, look, they did have one change in their lineup because Jake Livermore was kept out as a precaution, had some knee issues, but maybe Val will put him in for the game against Ipswich that is coming up very forthcoming and shortly. But it was Sierralta who replaced Livermore in that holding role in central defensive midfield. And I thought Sierralta played pretty darn well. Watford played pretty darn well in this game, and they were not intimidated or overawed by a Saints side that had already won 5 away games this season. And they were on their way to making it 6 because they were literally roughly 30 seconds or so away from holding that end of the bargain to make it 6 away wins when up stepped Reece Healey and scoring a goal that I think that the goalkeeper for Southampton will have nightmares about, probably still is having nightmares about that, after Gavin Bazunu, I think his name is, could not make the save, and he should have. And he had a very good game up to that point. He had made saves all over the place against a Watford side that peppered his goal and really should have scored before. Ken Sema in one-on-one in the first half, one-on-one, couldn't get it past Bazunu. Asprilla How did he not score in the second half of this game? A really good shot, low angle to the right hand side of the goalkeeper. Somehow the goalkeeper got a palm to it and pushed it away. It was certainly going goal bound, but Watford could not find a way through until that moment in the 96th and 97th minute when Reece Healy, coming off the bench, got an important assist from Bio. And Bio, really underrated in this game. I think he had a very good game for the very few minutes he was on the pitch. Good header from him, headed it into the path of Healy, bounced up for him, and then he took it and put it right past Bazunu underneath his body and into the back of the Southampton net to get a well-deserved point for a Watford side who I said earlier kept the Southampton goalkeeper very, very busy and kept him on his toes. Watford have begun to do that this season a bit more these last few games. They did that quite a bit against the Hull goalkeeper, who was especially vulnerable. They tried to do that against Leicester to a limited degree until the second half came along and they were completely out of the equation. They did that a lot against the Norwich goalkeeper as well. And so Watford now beginning, this men's first team, beginning to find confidence and rhythm and consistency. Not just consistency in the fact that they have been unbeaten in 9 of their last 10, but consistency in game. From phase to phase in the game, they've become a lot more coherent and consistent within the phases of play in a game and within halves too. They're trying to, I think now, I'm beginning to see that they're balancing their style of play and the way they're playing in both halves. Now, maybe they might play better in one half than they do in the other half, but the fact is that they are going about their business in the right way and maintaining a level of consistency and intensity in a number of these games recently to keep themselves in contention to get either a point, as they did here, again, a well-deserved point against Southampton, or get all 3 points, as they did against Hull City. And that mentality and that confidence and character are growing in this side. You can see it. This men's first team has confidence, consistency, and character. The 3 C's that are absolutely beginning to manifest themselves in this Watford first team of men who are playing this game now with some savvy, with maturity and belief in themselves, that mentality that sees them going from strength to strength and not hanging their heads when the opposition score. We saw that against Hull. Watford scored early. Hull came back within a minute and a half, and then Watford kept the game on an equilibrium despite a lot of Hull pressure and then persevered. That game management has improved in these last few games. You begin to see Watford hold the ship to where it is, suffer as a team together, play together as a team, and then get over the edge, get over that next mountain, and then try to get the game won and then manage the game out. So there's a rhythm and a coherence to the way that Watford are approaching these games now, and they are beginning to form an identity and a cohesion that you can't ignore. You can see the way that these games are being played now, whether it's the Norwich game and Watford not hanging their heads there, whether it's the Hull City game not giving up there. The character is really showing through with these lads. And what else is also clear to me, the personality of this team is also growing. Kone being given the freedom to roam and do his thing. Kayembe looking very, very good indeed. I think a completely different player than what he was with Watford in that midfield. The way he's growing in this game. Ryan Andrews becoming a quiet leader at right back. You're beginning to see Jamal Lewis doing, in fact, doing some really good things. A guy who was injured the first 2 months of the season and who has now come in and assumed that left back role and done very, very well indeed in a very quiet way, making an impact. Got a very important assist for the Rajovic goal against Norwich City just a couple of weeks ago. And I really do like the way he has conducted himself and just gone about his business quietly. And then you see the way that this defense is playing and Wes Hoot's leadership in that back line. And you're beginning to see Ryan Porteous never afraid of a challenge. Bio doing all the hard grafting and all the hard work, doing the little things on the pitch that make a big difference. That header that he headed down for Reece Healy, it doesn't get talked about a lot, but that is a very important moment. A big assist for Bio, who hasn't scored lately, hasn't had a lot of playing time lately. He's coming off the bench and he's handled it well. Great professional, great team player. We know that about Bio. I'm a big fan of his because he does all the little things. He does all the things that you don't necessarily recognize or see, even if he might not be scoring. He never lets that affect his game. Unlike people like Saw, who was here, when he's not having a good game or he's not scoring, that completely he completely is affected by that, and then he ends up not doing a thing. Whereas Bio, very different player, but where Bio comes in, and if he's not scoring, he doesn't let that affect other phases or other aspects of his game. And he does a lot as a team contributor, does a lot of hard running. I love the way that he runs. He never gives up on the play. He tracks back, he holds up the ball. I think he's a good link-up player. I think that look, and while he doesn't score as much as I'd love him to, the fact of the matter is he works hard for the team. In fact, he works harder than Rajovic does, who, although Rajovic, I think, had a decent game, needs to be running more into space and doing those things and the intangible things that Bio does. I think that can give Rajovic a next level status, if you will, if he can get his complete game correct. I think Bio has more of a complete game, but I'm happy with the way the starting lineup's conducted itself and keep Rajovic in the starting lineup. But I also think that Val should try to play two up top because when he switched the formation about in this game against Southampton, you've begun to see how Watford can be. And he had the two up top with Bio and with Healy. And you saw how that manifested itself in this game and ended up being a 1-1 draw for Watford, a well-deserved point against a Saints side that didn't really trouble Ben Hamer in the Watford goal. But I can definitely tell you that Watford troubled Southampton a lot. Bazunu, how on earth he made all these great saves? Well, he is a really good goalkeeper, but how on earth, again, as I'll say, Espria did not score is beyond me. But the fact of the matter is, again, sleepless nights for Bazunu, and that final shot, Watford got the point they deserve on my birthday, no less, I should say. And Watford going from strength to strength now. And again, 9 of their last 10 unbeaten. They take on Ipswich next at the Vic in another game that will test the Watford mettle, and we will see how they go. But Val got everything right, I thought, with the subs, and they definitely were the difference in this game. And I thought that the team played well overall, controlling much of the game despite the fact that Southampton had more possession. Possession, as they say, is 9/10 of the law. Scoring is the other 10th. And while Southampton got off the mark on the 56th minute with Che Adams, they really didn't do a whole heck of a lot after that to really trouble Ben Hamer, who I thought had a good game anyway, made 2 or 3 good saves, but really did not get troubled by this Southampton side that, as I said, had won 5 away games this season and were in 4th place in the championship. Watford continuing on with character, courage, consistency, and certainly confidence is on their side. This has been the YouOrns 10-minute take.